Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Rest from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really fun review for you from the brand Seiko. A little bit about them. They were founded back in 1881. They are of course Japanese in origin, but now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to extremely high end. Now, as far as this type of watch goes, you can consider it a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in sign language when you're looking for a dive watch: you're going to want something that's of course water resistant through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. Now, this particular model is the Prospex Urban Safari SBDY061 for the JDM nomenclature, and then if you're buying it, the international version, it's known as the SRPE31. So basically, it's the kind of that urban tactical take on the very popular tuna profile. And one thing I will also note is that it's actually a smaller, more compact take on the tuna profile. And I know some of you might be thinking that 43.3 millimeters sounds very big, but you have to understand that this is a watch that's typically 45, 47 plus. And one of the reasons why it's still so popular and so wearable is because of that really near lugless design. As you can see, there's very little overhang. The lug to lug length on here is really only 43.8, so under 44 millimeters lug to lug. This thing wears like an absolute dream. So it's not only is it an urban safari tuna, it's also kind of a mini tuna as well, and it's automatic, which is absolutely great, because previously, for the longest time, the most affordable tuna you could get would be a quartz model that costs about $1,000 or more. So to get one that actually has an automatic hacking hand windable movement, for me, is a huge benefit. Also, the fact that it's also quite stylish and really takes a chance in updating some of the more tired kind of trends. I mean, if you want to have that classic Seiko, there's tons within their catalog right now that are all about the classic style. I think it's really cool to kind of see this one where they're really doing something a little bit more modern and kind of meshing an updated aesthetic to a very classic silhouette overall. So with that said, let's actually get this piece in hand for a closer look. All right, guys, as you can see, absolutely gorgeous. I love the shades of gray here. You actually do also get that black DLC case, and that is a hard coat, similar to the Dia Shield, but it just happens to have a dark tint to it. But this thing is absolutely gorgeous. You can get these for $417 through Sakura Watches. I'll leave a link in the description, guys. Lately, if you've been watching my videos, you know Sakura has kind of been my go-to for JDM releases. Even ones that are international and global releases, they get them first, basically in the JDM spec, and you can have it flown over and at a price that's still within retail or slightly less, which I think is great. So there's actually some pretty sweet deals if you check them out. Definitely check out the links below. So at 43.3 millimeters, so basically 43 millimeters across here, this thing, you would think, okay, well, that's similar to something like an Oris Aquis, right? And I have a 43 millimeter Aquis, might be 42, but because it's an older model, but still, I gotta say, this thing wears smaller, and a lot of it has to do with the dial size. So there's the ratio of the dial size to the bezel ratio, and then you just do have just a little bit of overhang from the bezel, basically from this really great shroud, which obviously not only stylistically looks pretty cool, it also provides you with functional protection for your timepiece. Essentially, you have a built-in crown guard there, although the crown is at that 4 o'clock position, so it's more out of the way. The nice thing is you still get some extra protection there, and you can see that the brushing on here is absolutely impeccable. So it's not one of those thick, kind of PVD coats where it just looks like it's all you see is the coating. Here you can see that beautiful fine brushing shining through, and oh, here we go. Let's hear the action. Oh, the thing that I've noticed, oh yeah, the thing I've really noticed and loved about the last few Seiko rotating bezels I've handled is that there's the smoothness there that you love, but they still add just enough click in there to really make it feel tactile and audible. So you really feel the clicks, you hear the clicks, but they're not in any way choppy or making it hard to use. And the angle here on the grip makes it so easy. There's no pushing down. There's nothing weird. I mean, obviously you do have to line up your fingers here versus here because you're not going to be able to get it. But as long as you're here, I mean, it's pretty easy, guys. And it does line up pretty nice. There is just a hair of play there. But for me, the way I recognize good play versus bad play is if I can back it up and on that hard click, the hard stop, it actually aligns. And in that case here, it does, which is really great. So you got the 120 click bezel, and it's actually loomed from the 12 o'clock all the way to the 20-minute marker, which is absolutely wonderful. Obviously, if you're timing anything underwater or in darkness, that is a definite plus. Now, the crown, of course, is not signed because within the Prospex line, they don't sign the crowns anymore, so you're not going to get that here. But I don't think it hurts because it's still well executed. And then, of course, when you think about kind of the symmetry with the bolts for the shroud, and then you have the crown, I think it actually looks quite good. One thing that I was really surprised by was how highly finished this case back is, guys. Let me actually give it a quick wipe off camera here for a second. It was a little bit musty. I didn't say actually smudgy. A little bit smudgy because I just actually had it on the wrist. But if you guys look at the transition from the brush to the polish and how sharp that is, that's like they didn't have to do that. But what that is Seiko kind of accidentally impressing you with their prowess and their skills. And the nice thing is, of course, although you can't see the movement, it is Seiko's very, very reliable and competitive 4R36 movement. It's not a 6R movement, so you don't get the Sprawn hairspring, but it's hacking and hand windable. And honestly, it still has basically all of the great feature set of the 7S26, but now you have the hacking and hand windable movement. So it works really good. Obviously, very, very well known for its shock resistance. It's a really solid movement, and I think the only drawback is the fact that they've used it in cheaper watches, but this is not a super expensive watch, honestly, at $400. Considering everything that you're getting, I think you're getting a nice package at that price point. It's not highly overpriced. It's not bargain bin, but this is not meant to be a bargain bin watch. This isn't, an SKX from 20 years ago where they're selling an overabundance of stock on the gray market and you're getting some great steal. It's not that at all. This is a brand new release at a very fair price for the market. Now, the case back, again, really nicely done. It's not black, so you do get a nice touch of steel there, nice contrast, and then, of course, on your skin, I'm sure it feels a little bit better. Not that the coatings have ever bothered me, but maybe that's why, or maybe it's just because it's constantly going to be coming into contact with something, so they figured why coat it. But I dig it. I really, really love the way this one looks. You have obviously this beautiful keeper here. Another thing about the more mini, quote unquote, dimensions is that it has a 20mm lug width, which is like, that might be a Tuna first. I feel it's like all of them have been 22mm lug widths in the past, at least from I've always seen. So 20mm on the lug here is great. The strap obviously is going to fit a lot nicer because it's slightly thinner than your typical 22. So I'm a really big fan of that. Now, when we get close onto this dial, you can see that, of course, we have applied indices, which is great. We have a beautiful matte gray dial. We have the day date at the 3 o'clock. We have white font over black discs, which is wonderful. And then, of course, the hand is kind of blocking there. But I'm sure, as you guys were noticing earlier, there was a kanji day wheel. So basically the days of the week, you can switch between English or the Japanese kanji, which is great. I choose to use the Japanese one just because it just adds a little bit of visual interest and, kind of plays up the JDM-ness of it. Also, this does have the Made in Japan text on the dial, which is another nice little feature for collectors. Most people don't care about it, but it is a nice little bonus. Now, another thing you'll notice, as you get with most Seiko divers, or at least ones that are actually meant to be divers, is that, check it out, guys, it does have the divers 200 meters text on there. And for you to have that, what means that you've gone through ISO certification. So basically, this meets or exceeds the ISO standards to carry that divers text. You'll see a lot of other watches that will just say 200 meters or 20 ATM, whatever. It's not to say that they don't meet the certification, but you know what, a nice thing is that Seiko does meet it, and they do go the extra and pay a little bit more to get everything certified and get everything in the books and done right. So I can definitely appreciate that. And then of course you've got some great Seiko Lume Bright, really well applied on the indices, and then also within the bezel and the section that glows. The strap is really nice. It's a silicone polymer, non-tapering, but it basically flares a little bit out at the 20 millimeter lugs and then just comes back to 20 essentially. So it's one of those ones where it's not going to fit super thin or anything like that. It actually keeps on your wrist very nicely, which I can appreciate. And then you do have this really great buckle, and then the really cool signed keeper there, which has some nice bevels, as you can see, really nicely done. Great brushing, you can see through the coat. And then, you know, a little bit of a more standard clasp, but it's still well done, and a nice piece of milled hardware there, nice little chunk. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on wrist. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this thing wears really just about perfectly. You can see as I rotate, really nice, not too much extra tongue that sticks out there. It's held in really nicely by the keeper. It lays really nice. You got a really short lug to lug there, so you can see it just lays on the wrist nicely. It's not even that thick, guys, when you think about it. I mean, 13 millimeter height isn't bad at all. There are watches that don't have a really cool tuna shroud and a big tool-like nature that are taller than that, just by, you know, they end up just being thicker. And here you get this ISO certified diver that actually plays really nicely on the wrist. It's not by any means a small watch, right? But it's not large or oversized. I feel like this is kind of the premium size. I think if they went a little bit smaller, it would probably look too small in certain ways, and it would lose a little bit of its character. And then, of course, it plays bigger when you get bigger ones that actually wear a little bit smaller, but you know, that's kind of what these are all about. It looks like a big old useful functional instrument sitting on your wrist, and I think here it still does. They didn't undersize it or anything. I think they dialed it in just right, so I really dig that. And I can say honestly, on the wrist, I love the way this thing wears. I love the little bit of give and a little bit of play that you get from these little contours on the upper portion, as well as it gives you a little bit of flex for it to really hold on to your wrist nicely, and everything stays in really great. So everything holds together. It's really high quality, not a dust magnet by any means. So they've really dialed in this particular material that they use on these straps, because look at that. I mean, and it's soft to the touch, super pliable. It can flap around, you know, when you take it off. So it's not stiff at all, but it's not like overly porous to where it's going to have a bunch of stuff stick to it. So I dig that, and I think they really did a great job. So with that said, let's actually go ahead and set up for some low light transition and Lume. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. And as you can see, this thing burns. This is the type of Lume that you expect from a Seiko diver and from a Seiko Tuna. This thing is absolutely legible, absolutely functional, and just screams diving tool. So with that said, one thing I also like to do within these Lume shots is actually work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in direct sunlight, out in the middle of a field or something. Sometimes you're going to be in less than optimal lighting conditions, coming in and out of a vehicle, or in and out of a building, or just underneath an overhead tree or something like that. But one thing you'll also notice with these low light transitions is look at the way the light plays over that metal keeper. man, that brushing looks outstanding. And then even if I put some harsher contrast lighting here, which typically will expose, you know, any imperfections within the finish, look at the way that the brushing holds the light. Very evenly done, you know, very uniform. The textures look amazing. The colors are rendering absolutely outstanding. And you can just see that it just does it well. And then even the little textures on the strap, I think look really, really great. But one thing I really love, look at that. Look at the way that the brushing around the bezel, and then of course the keeper is just to stand out there with the fine. You can see how black and dark that polished bevel is on the corner there. Look at how sharp that is, the contrast. Then we go and get a little bit of light on it. Get a little shine. You can see there's a little bit of cloudiness, but that's more so from my fingerprints versus the actual polishing. But you can see once the light hits it, look at that, it just lights up. So really nicely done from that standpoint. Look at the lume again, still really beautiful and really well done. Now, closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist. This wears probably more like a 40mm watch. It honestly wears a lot like my 40mm SBDY061. And that watch wears pretty perfectly, and this does too. I love the way this thing fits and wraps around the wrist. You know, as far as model variations go, there's also a desert tan option, which is great, especially on that tactical side. Of course, this has more of that kind of urban tactical SWAT type of look to it, which ends up being, for me anyway, a little bit more versatile. But if you're thinking more kind of outdoors, kind of landmaster style, maybe, you know, something for somebody who spends a lot of time in earth tones, right? A lot of khakis and greens, and or maybe he's out in the field in the military. This is really a great watch for somebody who's in uniform because it just goes really well. It just has that uniform play of colors and that kind of monotone style where there's not too much going on. It really finds a way to kind of disappear on your wrist visually in a lot of ways. So as far as comparable models go, tough to compare this to anything. Of course, there are some watches now that pay homage to the Seiko Tuna that do have the Seiko instruments equivalent to the 4R 36 movement, which would be the NH36, and you can get those at decent prices as well, and you'll get things like sapphire instead of the Hardlex here. But again, guys, Hardlex mineral, it's not just a mineral crystal. It's not your typical chippy, scratch easily kind of mineral crystal. I've never had any problems with Hardlex on Seiko. I've had pretty much nothing but problems with mineral crystals on any other watch, to include Orient. So they're not the same. I don't know what they do to the Hardlex. Obviously, they grow it proprietary in-house. This thing is really scratch resistant and really nicely shatter resistant as well. So I'm a big fan of Hardlex. I'm not huge on, you know, oh, I push for a sapphire on a Seiko. I'm fine with it being Hardlex. One thing I do push for is having hacking hand-windable movement, which you do have here. So for me, the bottom line, this is really the affordable Mini-Tuna many of us fans have been waiting for, to include myself. I love this thing. I really don't want to return it, so I think I'm going to try to purchase it from Sakura, although they've been really great about sending me stuff ahead of time so that I can really showcase how awesome some of their inventory is. For me, this one is definitely a keeper, so I'll be pushing to pay for this one as well. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.